the next speaker is Luciano Rila, who was the Athena Swan lead for UCL, who have recently been awarded a silver award. So if Luciano would like to start to screen share. You're there?
Yeah, we can do that. Can everyone hear me?
I can.
Yeah, good. So, full screen. So we recently been awarded the Silver Award, and the idea of this presentation.
I cannot see your screen yet, sorry.
Oh, because I didn't share my screen, thank you. Right. Better now?
Thank you. Yep.
My apologies.
Yes. Can you go? Yeah.
Yeah, it's there. That's there. So the idea of the presentation is to just kind of narrate my experience as the lead, as the co-chair, because I was the co-chair. I had Professor Helen Wilson as my co-chair. So yeah, lessons from an Athena Swan Silver Award. So in case you haven't met me before, this is who I am. I am a lecturer in teaching UCL Maths. I joined the department a long time ago, 12 years ago, as an outreach officer. If you know what the Further Math Support Program is, I actually joined the department as part of the Further Math Support Program. But then I started dealing with EDI in 2014 because I organized outreach event for year 10 students at the Royal Institution called Celebrating Women in Mathematics. And it was huge. It was a huge event that we then ran it again the year after. And then I started kind of feeding into the Athena Swan application because of the outreach events that I was organizing. And I joined the SAT in 2016. In our previous cycle, well, not the one we've just won. And then I became co-chair with Helen Wilson in our latest cycle and at the current one as well. As I said, we got a silver award in April this year. We submitted in November in 2020. And I also co-founded with Javier Bautista, who is a PhD student in neuroscience, the LGBTQ plus STEM at UCL network last year. And obviously proving that we're not afraid of all these letters there. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about, I'm afraid, the data and then the narrative that comes out of that data, how we evaluated the progress of our previous action plan and how we produced the action plan and the things that went well and the things that I wish I knew when I started all that, and then some personal reflections. So let's talk about the data. My advice is collect the data as early as possible for two reasons. The data is really hard to collect and it's very comprehensive. So it will save you some pain and frustration, but also informs the work of the SAT. So even though obviously, you know, we had data, we had admissions data, we looked at the staff data every year, but it wasn't collected and put it in a graph. And I think not having that wasn't good practice. I think it's good practice to update the data in all the graphs and have that overview of what is going on in the department. So I will try and not do that this time. Also, you know, data can be qualitative as well. So when you think about the application, it's good to have focus groups or just maybe ask colleagues for comments, use quotes throughout the application. Some of the data is not available or you can't disaggregate because the numbers are so small. And that could be a way of navigating this lack of availability of the data. So for example, we couldn't disaggregate professional service staff because the numbers are too small. So we did like mini surveys with them and some focus groups with them just to collect some data from that particular group. And also, you know, I think I got to a point where I got so obsessed with data. You know, obviously some data are mandatory, so you can't escape that. And then you're looking for other data that is really hard to find. And it got to a point where one of the set members, I was discussing with him and kind of despairing about data. And his question was, do we have enough data to back up our claims? Why do you want the data to be perfect and get data for absolutely everything? I'm not sure if this is the way to go. And that stayed in my mind and helped me kind of accept that my data would be flawed. But as long as it was adequate to back up the story of our application, then it was probably good enough. Right, and then from the data, kind of the story emerges and you have to find the story of your department. It seems pretty simple, but the story that we found actually evolved all the time. It's almost like you think that the story is clear from the data that you get, but that's not what I found. Because it's not just about the data, it's about the actions and about impact and about good practice. And it took us some time and a lot of feedback to kind of pinpoint and identify the things that we were actually doing right and that were having an impact. So, so I think some of the things I'm going to say will overlap with what Peter was saying as well. So in the narrative, it's not just about presenting the graphs, but analyzing and reflecting on the data. You know, what maybe led you to have that data, why the data looks like that. And it could be about the good things about the data and the bad things about the data as well. And as to, you know, identify that story of our department, feedback from other people really helped. So at UCL, we have internal mock panels, and we were lucky to be able to submit our application 3 times to the mock panels. And every time we got different feedback that to some extent we had to filter as well. But it was interesting because certain actions that we had that we didn't think much of them, we would get feedback from a mock and they would say, oh, this is amazing. And we didn't really think it was that amazing, but we started to question those things as well. I also was part of the LMS budding scheme with Lancaster. That was very helpful. And just, you know, chatting to colleagues from other departments leading the set as well. And then in that narrative, you have to identify what went well, what didn't go as well, and also what is going really badly, which we did have things that were not very good at all, but we didn't shy away from that. And I think that's really important. You know, it is about self-reflection more than anything else. And once you know the story that you want to tell, you can curate your narrative. And I think that worked really well in our application. And we used like 3 devices to curate our narrative. The first one was the impact box, where, you know, it was kind of an evaluation of the progress of our action plan. So the issues that were identified, the actions that we had, and the impact. So this, you know, appears throughout the application. The other device was to refer to the action plan. You know, when in the narrative issue was identified, then we would put that box that led to an action linked to the issue in the narrative. And the other thing we used was quotes from staff and students, also to, you know, provide some anecdotal evidence of the things we were trying to say. So I think with that, it makes the life easier for those assessing the application. Now, evaluation of the progress. So a lot of I'm going to say from now on, it really came from the feedback that we got. So this is the snapshot. This graph is from the description of the department section in our application, and compares the current data, well, the data then, to the data that we had in our previous application. And if you look at postdocs and teaching staff, it actually got a lot worse. But we didn't shy away from that. So that's why I think I'm encouraging you, I honestly thought that this was the end of our silver award, but it wasn't. So, honest reflections on actions that, didn't have the impact that we hoped, as long as that informs the action plan that you're proposing, that counts as good for the application. This is a good thing. The other thing that they praised us for is that the evaluation process was not static. As we evaluated the progress, we identified new issues and we added new actions. And that was seen as evidence of learning from the evaluation process. So this is, something that you should think about when you put together your application. Action plan. I know that this has been talked a lot about. It has to be smart. No one complained about that, but anyway. Less monitoring and more action. I think Peter was going to talk about not use monitoring all the time, So it's not about monitoring, it's about doing things. One thing that also was praised, it was the fact that we coded our actions according to the priority. I'm going to show an example. So high priority, medium priority, and low priority in the action plan document. And, find structural changes, however small. And that's the thing. If I learned anything from this process, was to find structural changes, because these are the ones that are bound to make a difference in the long term. Actions that are embedded in the processes of the department, rather than just doing things, but embedding things, I think is the way to change the culture. And also the thing that we did, and I really encourage you to do that, is to consult colleagues that are outside the set, because they can share their insights, they can suggest possible actions if they are in key roles in the department. So we did that a lot as well, and that was very helpful. I'm just conscious of time. So this is just a snapshot of our action plan, and we prioritize, this is high priority, this is medium priority, this is low priority. So it was very clear in the action plan what we felt was priority or not. Right, I'm nearly there. So things that went well. I mean, I have to praise my head of department because she's amazing, Professor Helen Wilson, and obviously having a strong senior level support is what you need to propose changes at all. We were very honest about our data analysis, so we didn't shy away from the things that were going very badly, especially the postdocs. The data was clearly and consistently presented, and the application is really, really beautiful document, and I can't take any credit for that whatsoever. We had a PhD student, David Sheard, who put a lot of effort into all the formatting and all the boxes and everything. And it does look really, really good. We did pay him handsomely because he worked very hard. That the action plan was linked to data. So, everything that we did in the action plan came from data, and the action plan was smart. And also we do put a lot of effort to support the career of professional service staff, and we put a lot of care in the sections for professional services staff as well, and that was praised in the application. Now, things I wish I knew. So this is my like warnings. How hard it is to get all the data. You know, I think different institutions will have, it will be different, but it was very hard to get all the data. It took ages and ages, months to get the data. So get ready for that. Chairing a large committee requires thoughtful strategy. So the committee had about 18 people. And, you know, it worked and people worked well. But we didn't really have clear roles for each member. And at times it just felt a little bit chaotic, which I'm kind of used to it. But I think, you know, having some thought of how you're going to run the committee can be very helpful. You know, doing actions is not enough. So I talked about that already. You know, we need to embed those actions in the workings of the department so that they perpetuate. So when the new head of department comes in, the things are embedded in the way that we do things in the department. And obviously this can be changed, but it needs, you know, an active, deliberate action to change things. So it's a good thing to embed actions in the processes. That is a very important one. The Athena Swan is a collective effort. And my set work collectively. And when we wrote the application, lots of people worked very hard on the application as well. But I always saw myself as like the sole person responsible for everything. And I don't think it helped me. So this time round, I do want to distribute very clearly what the responsibilities are. And also, you know, I learned that EDI is a departmental effort, that we should engage with colleagues outside the set. We should ask them to perform some tasks for the set, in fact. So we are currently putting together a small workforce to work on our workload model. And there was a call actually today from the head of department asking colleagues to join, you know, form a group of 3 to 4 people to work on that. And they're not part of the set. So we're going to try and do more of that and get more and more the department involved. So just to close my presentation, I want to just to offer some personal reflections. You know, the Athena Swan process was very painful and frustrating, and I almost gave up, and I definitely cried a few times, but I learned a lot, and I kind of allow myself to entertain the idea that maybe we did make a small difference. So the end of it was very satisfying. Challenge the gatekeeping by proposing structural changes, however small. You know, we need to think of new processes, new ways of assessing excellence, and to diversify academia. And nurture environments that allow those who don't conform to thrive. So I'm very big on that. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to found the LGBTQ in STEM network, so that we can just have any self-expression that we want without that being a barrier for our careers. And I will stop there.
Thank you, Luciano. That's amazing. You've done such a fantastic job.
Thank you.
And thank you for flagging up the LMS buddy system. For anyone else out there, you can exchange your applications for Athena Swan with another department applying through the LMS. And as Luciano said, he swapped his with Lancaster. I think Lancaster are about to submit or have submitted.
Right, yeah.
So if you would like to ask questions, please go ahead. Just raise your virtual hand or put it in chat.
Thank you.
It was pretty fantastic. I agree with that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was the first time, so I wasn't quite sure. So it's good to have good feedback.
Are there any questions or comments for Luciano? One hand raised. Who's that?
Sally.
Please go ahead, hand. Sally.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I'm assuming you were applying under the post 2015, not the new transformed charter.
Yeah.
I just wanted to. Well, I'm hoping, therefore, that the huge amount of pain and frustration around accessing the data might be something that would be lessened if you choose, well, presumably you will in your next application use the new framework. So I'm hoping there's some sense that that pain might reduce.
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of it is down to the universities as well, you know, to be able to provide that data and to have systems that support the Athena Swan sets across the institution, really. So there's a question about having a large set, which actually the current one is very large as well. To be honest, I don't think being large is a problem. Actually, it was good. I think what wasn't good is that when we recruited the first set, I had just become chair, so I really didn't have the experience. And Helen also didn't have the experience. And we weren't very clear about responsibilities. And I think we weren't very clear ourselves about the responsibilities. So some of the set members thought that all they needed to do was to come to meetings and, you know, share their views, which was helpful. I'm not saying that that wasn't helpful, but it's more than that. But we didn't say that from the start. So it just became, yeah, sometimes frustrating. And I don't think there's actually, it is good to have representation from different corners. So that's why you end up with such a big set, because you want PhD students and postdocs and senior members of staff and professional service members of staff. And so when you add them up, it's huge. So I think it's okay. How soon before applying? I mean, it's a bit of a luxury, but it was helpful for me to be able to have 3 mocks, plus having Lancaster reading my application, and having people reading your application like early on when it's incomplete and it's still rubbish. And you know, it's good because it is, for us, it was quite overwhelming to write the application, and having feedback from a mock panel, even though the application was incomplete and still pretty rubbish, it gave us some pointers to kind of carry on. It was a little bit of motivation. You know, someone is holding your hand and saying, do this and do that next. So, you know, and then you improve the application. It's like, oh, this is looking good. And then you do another mock. And then there's another group of people holding your hand saying, now you have to do this and that and the other. And then slowly you build up the application. So if you can have that, that would be great. Now, if your LMS budget will be prepared to read your application several times, I would probably say no, you know. So I would do it if I would do it just once, I would do it when it's almost ready. Because it is very helpful that other people read your application and give their views about, as I said, you know, it's the story that is in your application really evolves as you reread it, as you get feedback from other people that tells you, oh, this is amazing when you didn't think it was amazing. So we kind of, that really helped.
Yeah, I think frequently you swap your Athena Swan applications with another department who is about to submit, because you're not in competition with each other. You're both trying to get, you know, to reach a certain standard to get the award. So you give feedbacks, and you can't really, you know, you don't give feedback too soon, but it also helps actually to see other people's applications as well. And you know, you just swap and you give your feedback on theirs and they give their feedback on yours, and you look at the ideas that they have and they look at your ideas, and it's very useful to, you know, but I don't think you can do that too soon. But equally, of course, there's a deadline of when you've got to submit. I don't know.
Following what Anne said, actually, that was one thing I want to put in my presentation that I forgot. So I'm part of the mock panels as well at UCL, and that's really helpful for your own application. You know, it was only when I started being part of panels that, one, I started reading applications from beginning to end, right? But that is really helpful, and you do see good practice. You know, and you think, oh, I never thought of that. Maybe we could do that in my department. And so if you can do that, it's, you know, extra work, but it really helps with learning about the application and sharing good practice. So I would recommend that. I'd be interested. Any more questions? Oh, Anna, you muted.
Sorry, I'm always doing that. Are there any further questions? So
Right.
Sally's asking for panel members. They'll be recruiting in future. And maybe we should move back to Peter if he's fixed his sound. Peter, are you ready to?
I'm ready. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, Peter.
Okay, so now let me resume. So I'm going to just say some more things about. I'll make all my slides available. There's a lot more information on various questions and ideas about it on other ones that I'm not going to present today. But so some tips for writing an application: stay focused, be specific and show evidence. And two aspects of style I've seen being criticized by panels.
You're mute again, Peter.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I've just had to change the settings on my computer.
Okay.
I think it automatically muted me for some reason. Okay, so two things that are being criticized: statements without evidence, and this is a recruitment to postgraduate programs has improved since we made our open days more inclusive. There's no information. And particularly vague language like a substantial number, a high proportion, a reduced teaching load. Well, what do they mean? Reduced teaching, does that mean one less lecture course, or what? I mean, you frequently see statements saying people coming back from maternity leave have a reduced teaching load, but don't quantify it. And use relevant good practice examples, adhere to the application word limits, and note that now it's quite unlikely that there'll be a mathematician or someone from a similar discipline on the panel. So you need to keep this in mind. Also, I mean, the panel I was on in July, there were, of the reviewers, I was the only academic, though the chair was also an academic who was a chemist. So that's something to be borne in mind. And don't use sophisticated statistical methods to analyze the data. I've seen applications from particularly statistics departments using very advanced statistical methods to analyze the data. And frankly, no one on the panel knew what they were talking about. I think it's good to have someone who's got an experience of displaying data, and certainly in the form of tables and figures, is actually very good. When we made our silver application a few years ago, we had a statistician who did all the tables and figures, and he made them look absolutely beautiful. So it is actually really worth trying to get somebody who knows how to make it really look good, but just don't use sophisticated statistical methods to actually analyze it. Though when you sign up to a panel now, they do ask you of your ability at analyzing statistical data, because they say they want to have at least one person on each panel who has a certain amount of expertise in that area. Some challenges is found getting engagement with the Athena Swan agenda from senior, typically male members of the school or department. We were fortunate in the fact that several male members have children school ages, which partners who work away from Canterbury, so they knew the problems of getting the school run. Getting accurate data, this was mentioned earlier. I know you have to be careful with GDPR, but we used to keep a record of some of the important data because we couldn't get it out of the university, particularly with regard to recruitment and promotion. So you've got to be very careful about that kind of data and who actually sees it. Some of it may only be seen by the head of school, but it's worth trying. This data issue can be complacency, thinking that having some female members of staff is sufficient. One application stated that 10% of their professors were female, 1 out of 10, above the national average, so that's fine. And what I call the blokish culture, saying our seminars have always been at 4 p.m, so we're not changing them, so they're outside of core hours. I've actually known of one application that it almost literally fell on that statement alone, because it was on such the edge that tipped the balance. So I think that you just got to say that. I know now how it was resolved, and the head of school said that they only have money for seminars if they were held before 4 p.m. Some final thoughts. Measure bias by outcomes, not feelings. Unconscious bias has much less effect or even no effect without institutional and personal actions. Putting up photographs of female and black people in your discipline can have significant effect in the department. Unless inclusivity is active, the outcome is much the same as covert exclusion. And if you focus on the inclusive communities, this allows resources to be devoted to clearing obstacles for participation, as opposed to finding women for reluctant organisers to invite. And I think forcibly inviting women makes it for a poor experience for them. And so I'll just leave you with 2 quotes that you can read at the time. And thank you for your attention. I'm sorry about the technical problems I was having.
Thank you, Peter. We're now open to questions for Peter. So if you'd like to put your question, raise your virtual hands. or in chat? Maybe there aren't any. But from your experience over these years, has the new Athena Swan made it easier to submit?
Well, I've only seen applications from using the old form. From what so from that point of view, that has not changed, though their proposal of what they're going to have to do really is. I think the system is fairer in that it used to be quite random, seemingly, from the point of view of panelists who would you didn't know, you just turned up at the offices and gave your opinion. There was no submission of your thoughts or scores beforehand until quite recently. And so, and that helps. So you've all got an independent view, and they're being collated. So that means that you can, and you used to go through the applications section by section by section in quite some detail, whereas now you're looking at a more global picture. And if everybody thinks the application is very good, then you're not going to spend a great deal of time on it, because the answer is the outcome is fairly clear. It's the ones on the borderline are those that need a lot of guidance, that's what we're going to spend the time on giving. So, I mean, I'd actually do think that is going to be a better, it is a better process. It'll be interesting to see when the new forms and what that's actually going to make the difference of.
Okay, well, thank you. So are there any questions specifically for Peter? If not, all speakers are still in the room. So if there's any further questions you want to ask anyone, now's your opportunity.
And Sally has clarified what I said about someone being on the assessment panel.
Yes.
Saying
Sally,
that,
yeah, you can't guarantee a mathematician will be on your assessment panel, but there'll be some STEM application will have a panelist with STEM experience.
we're slightly different to some parts of STEM, I feel. We like to feel ourselves as being quite unique.
And Tony is recommending Neil Chamberlain, who gave an excellent talk to the IMA branch last week, describing some barriers he experienced as a mathematician. And it should be on YouTube this week. Thank you, Tony. I didn't see it, but I would agree that Nero would have been great. Any further questions to our panelists, our presenters? So if there are no further questions, perhaps I can ask you all what other workshops would be useful for you. We run these good practice scheme workshops at fairly regular intervals, and we're open to ideas and suggestions from the community as well as from the Good Practice Scheme Committee. So if you've got any ideas, either say them, put them in chat, or email John and myself.
I'm not sure if it's a suggestion, maybe it's not fully formed thought yet, but I wonder if we could have workshops where we can buddy up people who are writing the application, and they can bring maybe small sections of the application. You know, obviously you can't bring the whole document, but something like that. I don't know exactly, but something more practical. This is my application. Can you read it? Can you give me feedback? And something like that.
Yes. So that would be quite an interactive workshop. I think which is a great idea. I don't know whether we could do it with the LMS if there's enough departments submitting at the same time. It would be really possible to do that. But what that's a really good idea, though. So John's put in the chat where you should email if you have suggestions, in womeninmaths@lms.ac.uk. Other further suggestions?
Just to say, in terms of workshops, that I already mentioned that, and I know you're talking about your series, but I just wanted to flag that I mentioned the one on identifying priorities and designing an action plan. We will be running one subsequent to that on evaluating progress. And there are also anticipated to be some more webinars next year, for which we haven't yet determined the themes, but I expect that there will be some more focus on issues such as how we approach this work more intersectionally, and thinking about gender as a non-binary. So those are some of the issues we expect to cover in more detail on the advanced HE side.
Okay, thank you. And that's really, really useful. And Rachel's put in chat that if you have specific questions on the Athena Swan team regarding the Transform Charter, contact us at athena.swan@advancedhe.ac.uk. And that's in the chat. So is everyone exhausted then? It's because we're not doing it in person, so you don't get your cup of tea or coffee. I mean, if there's there must be further questions or suggestions on what more we can do. I think perhaps we've reached the end of everybody's stamina. In which case we could thank our speakers, our contributors, once again for all your wonderful, wonderful presentations. And I think it's appropriate to thank John. John will be moving to pastures new at the end of the year. So thank you very much for John's contributions to the LMS Women in Maths and Good Practice scheme.
Thank you.
And for all the speakers, thank you. Okay, I think it's probably time that we closed.
Sure.
Yep, that's great.
And
Thanks very much, Anne. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank
you so much for inviting me.
Really
Oh,
good.
thank you. Thank you for your contribution. That was amazing.